Hi, my name is Richard Wilkinson, and this is my defense on my research for History 797, the Antiquity. I am a PhD student here at Liberty University. I have about 2 years left in the program. I chose to look at the early church fathers and their teachings because I'm a religious historian and intellectual historian and like to look at the impact of religion on history and society. My research question for this paper was, what did the early church fathers teach about salvation? Was it through grace by faith, or was it through grace by faith and works? And then, why is this significant in history? How did it impact history, and how did history impact this doctrine? For evidence, I used the writings of Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage in the 3rd century, John Chrysostom, the Archbishop of Constantinople in the late 4th century, and Augustine, Bishop of Hippo Regius in the 5th century. I also used secondary writings about them, along with medieval thinkers like Aquinas, William of Ockham, Gabriel Bill, and then the Reformation, Martin Luther and John Calvin, to show the impact of their writings through history. The major conclusions that I found in my research was, as Carl Trueman, a theologian and historian, said, unmerited grace isn't going to be found in the early church fathers. Cyprian, Tertullian, John Chrysostom, even Augustine a little bit teaches that grace is based off of our merit. So Augustine goes towards an unmerited grace, especially in Confessions, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The earlier writers, you have to do something. And a lot of this, historians say, is because of the persecution of the early church. Martyrdom becomes the assured way of being saved. If you're a martyr, you are saved. And that's assured. And so with Cyprian, we see this in his writings. Martyrdom is what they're looking for. It's what he wants, and he's pushing it. And he's pushing almsgiving and works for salvation, a rehabilitation process of the sinner. John Chrysostom, who comes about 100 years later, has some of this in his writings, but he's also leaning towards a little bit of difference. The persecutions are now over. There are no martyrs. And so he's not talking about martyrdom as much, but he's still talking about almsgiving and the need to control our passions and desires to be saved. Augustine, while mentioning these, really starts to focus on unmerited grace. In his Confessions in Book 10, he says that God saved him even though he didn't deserve it. And it's this teaching that starts the Pelagian controversy between Augustine and those who agree with him, and Pelagius and his followers who say that we have to earn salvation in some way, whether it's by asking God into our lives to save us, his grace, or through a rehabilitation process. The Pelagians lose the controversy. The Roman emperors exile them so that hopefully their teachings are no longer taught. As we'll see when we look at the medieval ages, which I do a little bit, not much, that debate continues. So Aquinas is an Augustinian. He follows unmerited grace. William of Ockham and Gabriel Bill are considered semi-Pelagian. Works are important to salvation. With the reformers, what happens? So we can see where with the end of persecution, they start to change their ideas about salvation. With the reformers, though, what's going to happen is, one, the desire to get rid of the authority of the Pope. The Pope has the ability to forgive sins through almsgiving, buying indulgences, penance. And so if you get rid of works from grace, you limit the Pope's authority, which is good for those who don't want the Pope to have much authority, and religiously, but also for the secular rulers who want to limit the Pope's authority over the kingdom. And then we combine that with Martin Luther's desire for an assurance that he will be saved. And he's obsessed with this. Salvation with any kind of works attached means you're not assured of salvation. But salvation gratia sola, or sola gratia and sola fidei, you can be assured. God chooses who to save, predestines them, makes them good or makes them bad. And he uses Augustine to prove this. And so we can see that in history, this teaching was affected by the persecution of the Romans on the Christians. By the end of that persecution and the official church officially becoming the Roman Church, and then it's affected by the politics during the 1600s or 1500s, 16th century. I would like to continue my research with the early Christian or early church fathers, trying to see their impact on history, especially on the reformers, and how they led to the 15th and 16th century thinkers questioning various Catholic doctrines that would later cause the Reformation. Thank you. Have a good day.